born and raised in Stumptown in 1937, July 18th, at number 4 Morrow Street. Morrow Street is, you come in off of Cortland Avenue. You come in tomorrow. That was where we came into Stumptown at that time. And right around the corner, that's what all the apartments were. And I lived in, believe it or not, but there were apartments in all along Morrow Street. And the people who owned homes were the ones who lived on Gray Street, where you have probably met some, Al Whiteside and that group. So that's kind of levels of people where the funds were. um, my mother was a single mother. My father died when I was 8, and so my mother raised us, and we raised right there at Fort Morrow. Um, it was a great community. Most of my family lives there. My grandmother lived at 49 Morrow Street. She had her own home, um, and she had 13 children. My uncle stayed with her, and they had 2 or 3 houses on the property where my grandmother was at the time, and they grew all the vegetables and had fruit trees and all. And then you talk about entrepreneurship. My uncle would lease out some of his property, and there was a man who used to deliver coal and ice, and he had his business on our property in Stumptown. So it was just an up and coming community, and I stayed there until I graduated from high school. And at that time, I lost my mother, and we packed our suitcase and went home with my mother's sister, who had 8 children, and she took the 4 of us. So I sort of lived all over Asheville, but my beginning was in Stumptown. Oh gosh, lots of fun stuff. Well, the church, a lot of ours was around the church, Welfare Baptist Church, and we had people there who would do programs, and they had something almost every day of the week. They would have something going on there for us to do at the church. A lot of course was around Bible study, and then we used to have what we called the holler. I think there's an amphitheater or something down there now, but we that was where we would just go play. And then on the weekends, that was just a big deal, And then we had ball field down there, and some of the folks even started doing golf. I mean, but we entertained ourselves. It was just good, wholesome fun. And then we would have the folks who had a living room we'd have a house party, and then we could, the parents would all allow, maybe once a month or something, we would go and, and we make Kool-Aid and buy some cookies, and we'd have, I mean, and it was just great fun. And, I guess it kept us out of trouble. We didn't know that at the time. But it worked out. We survived. I went to school at Hill Street. Um, we left Stumptown, and we had to walk all the way up Montford or go through Mr. Campbell's Woods to Hill Street, past Montford School, go another half mile down Hill Street to school. I mean, we didn't think about it at the time because of course, it was not integrated at the time, and it was all black or white, and so we went to Hill Street, and I went to Hill Street until I I aged out of there. Used to be a school on Ashland Avenue, and Ashland Avenue used to have the junior high school. So it depends on where you were at the age. So I didn't go to Ashland Avenue because by that time they gotten rid of Ashland Avenue School, and I went straight from uh, Hill Street to Stevens Lee, and we walked from Stumptown every day to Stevens Lee. Um, but it was just, it was what it was. It didn't hurt us. It probably helped us because the walking probably helped us. But that's where I went to school, and then I graduated from Stevens Lee in 1955. We weren't a community that knew anything about slavery as we know slavery looked. It was, I think now we know it was still a form of slavery, but it wasn't the type where you were in fields working. But Asheville has always been a place where there were businesses. My mother worked at what was Highland Hospital, And it was a little mental hospital down in Montford. I think it's still there. And and then most of our folk did work at homes. Most of the people could afford to have somebody come in to do the day work, and that was what they did. My father was when before he passed on. There was a place called J.A. Baker Packing Company down on the river, and that's where they would do slaughtering all the hogs and stuff, and meat packing. And I'm just trying to lay the framework for how people were, how they survived. Um, at that time, they threw away the thing parts of that weren't eaten, like the pig feet and the pig ears and that. So my father started packaging it up, and then he would take orders on because he walked from Stumptown down to the river, and he would he'd take orders, and then he would come back up along the way home, and he'd come home with money all his pockets where he had sold his goods on his way home. But the jobs, that were no jobs as we know jobs today, because you were not allowed to be part of that industry. So we did what we did to survive, and that's what most of it was. We had professionals, but they were mostly teachers and jobs that you went to school to get educated for, where you knew you could get a job, and most of those were in the teaching field and that sort of thing. Well, the house that my grandmother had did not have indoor plumbing, and so they had an outhouse, and uh, they had water, but they didn't have toilets, and so that's what we used for that. And Mr. Lonzo, as I say, he was a cold person. The It's kind of getting in my mind, but all of this was up and down West Cortland. When you come all the way down going back toward Hillcrest, that was part of the river road, and so he would go get the coal, and then he would sell the coal to the community and ice, because at that time we had ice boxes. We didn't have refrigerators. Most people did, so you had to buy the ice. So he would come by with the ice, and you buy block of ice for your refrigerator a couple of times a week. We did. I think those were just the early days of what became known as for an official word of urban renewal. Um, as I said, my folk owned property. I have no idea what happened. My oldest uncle, he was on that property, and I'm thinking now, just from what I remember, because I had another aunt who lived in the community at the time, and one of the 13 children. But they owned that property, and then my grandmother died, and my uncle, his children would have inherited the property, but they all left Asheville, because that's what happens even now. I mean, folks get out of Asheville if they can, and they left Asheville, and some of them ended up in California and other places. And I have no idea how that property. I guess it was probably taken over for taxes or whatever they do. But because a lot of people did own property in Stumptown, but it got away from them. Now I'm coming forward to where I am now a little bit, because I compare that, and I think that's why we're so involved in our Shiloh community, because I know what can happen when you take your eyes off community. And it's not that you don't want folks to live in your community, but you don't want your community taken over, and that's kind of what I'm seeing. So I think that's one of the things I got from living in Stumptown, that it can go if you don't take care of your community. As far as reparation, to me, would be, what can we do now to make it better for our children? Not so much what can I get out of it. Remember your family, um, because that's kind of what all this was about. And we were losing a lot of that. Even where I am here in Shiloh, uh, we're really encouraging our young people, those who still part of a home, do something to try to make sure that we secure that for the future. But yeah, but I'm real proud of Stumptown. I know it's a long way from Stumptown, but I can't forget that that's my roots. That's my roots.